Welcome to another edition of the Tesla Roadster podcast sponsored by the Gruber companies. Do rodents like Teslas?
Apparently they do. Matchmaking expanded to parts sales.
Headlight mystery debunked.
And Roadsters overheating. Guess what we found?
I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner.
These and other stories on the Tesla Roadster podcast. One of the things that we are going to do is we've got a spillover from the last podcast. The first hour of this podcast from 10 MST to 11 is general EV information. And guess what? Roadsters came up in that conversation.
They sure did.
And the reason they came up is there is a supercar, EV supercar, the Rimac Nevera, which just broke a world record. The world record was how fast can a car go in reverse?
Mm-hmm.
And this car actually traveled at 171 miles per hour in reverse.
It's not only phenomenal just for the fact that it's 171 miles an hour and in reverse, it beat the old record by about 70 miles per hour.
Yes. And, you know, my first vision of this was I've got a healthy respect for that driver if he was literally sitting in that cabin looking forward and looking at his rear view mirror and the side view mirror and doing 171 miles per hour in reverse. But then you pointed out that there was a slight modification to that visual that I had.
It was. I did watch that particular video, and he had a small screen sitting above his steering wheel, and he was actually looking forward, but he was looking at that screen trying to drive backwards. I still huge respect because it looked like it was on like a 4 or 5 inch screen.
Yeah. So we put it out to the audience at the time. Does anybody know how fast a Tesla Roadster can go in reverse? And anyway, someone chimed up, and the answer to that was from the owner's manual, it cannot do 171 miles per hour.
No.
In fact, top speed, I think, on a Roadster is like 130 because there's no transmission and you've got one speed and you run out of RPMs before you get anywhere, right? But it turns out that the Tesla Roadster does limit the reverse speed. What was the mileage?
15 miles an hour is all.
Right. So anyway, that's probably a good thing if you think about it, because we'd probably see a lot more Tesla Roadster collisions if it was able to go 171 miles per hour in reverse.
I'm sure that you would see people trying anyway.
Mm-hmm. So today we've got a number of cool topics to share with you. And let's get to a few of them here. Any of you have any questions, feel free to chime in. Let us know where you're coming in from. That's always fun.
Maybe we could start with our background as well. Why is it that we have all the rodents, especially that rodent right in the middle of us that has 2 tails, one in the back and one in the front?
Today is a rodent theme. And the reason being is at Gruber Motor Company, we're beginning to see a lot more Tesla Roadsters with rodent damage.
Yes.
And it wasn't just the 3 Chinese Roadsters that we ended up finding somewhat extensive rodent damage, in that they actually chewed some of the wires as well.
Right.
Not just the insulation, but they, for some reason, decided to chew into the copper as well. By the way, I did find out why rodents like going in cars. Number of reasons. It gets cold outside. They want someplace warm to nest. There's no place better than a running board, nice and dark, inside a Tesla Roadster, inside a garage, and they may build a nest. And you might wonder, well, why are they chewing into rubber hoses, into insulation on the wires? Well, the wires, some of them have soy-based insulation, so they see that as a food source. But then you ask about rubber. How's that useful to them? Or the padding on the door panels. Well, it turns out for a couple of reasons. One is to sharpen their teeth.
Mm-hmm.
The second is nesting material.
Okay. Okay.
So today's theme is going to be rodents, and we'll talk about some of the preventive measures as well.
Boy, talk about expensive material. Napa leather nest.
Yeah, totally. You know, we see rodent damage typically on the driver's side running board. For some reason, they favor the left side of the car. And there are some coax cables that run through there for the camera in the back, for example. And that's usually one of the first things that is hit. In another Roadster that we have, a couple of them actually, they migrated up below the dash. And you've got some sensitive electronics there. You've got an airbag. You've got your switch pack there. You've got some instrumentation and some wiring harnesses, of course. And once they get into there, then you can have problems in a variety of places in the car. One of the most recent ones, we got an email. A customer said that he found mice that had congregated by the console. And now his VDS screen is very dim, and he can't get it in and out of gear anymore. So there are a variety of places that the rodents tend to prefer on a Tesla Roadster. So some of the mitigation techniques. Well, if you Google it, you'll probably find the same thing that I did. Febreze comes up occasionally. It is it's a powerful smell. And was it for a laundry, clothes drying type thing?
Yeah, air freshening, things like that.
I think we have a spray here somewhere too. And then you start getting into the chemicals. You have the organic types of sprays, such as peppermint spray, cayenne pepper spray. They all have a short-lived effect. If you were to impregnate like a cotton ball with any of these, fragrant fluids, it's short-lived because it's eventually going to dry. The less humane, I guess, products are mouse traps, rat traps. That's been a tried, tested, proven way. When I was homesteading in New York, I had a problem with rats. They would get into the grain bins and eat my laying mash, chicken feed for the goats, the chickens, the ducks, And I ended up getting a bit more creative. I borrowed my neighbor's barn cat. And of course, you don't feed the cat because there's plenty for it to forage and feed.
Right.
Unless you're feeding it kibble all day long, it's not going to go out and hunt. And that eventually solved my problem. So I don't know if you want to put a cat in your garage with your Roadster, if you want to try the chemical process, but I can assure you that some mitigation is important because by the time they do damage, it can get pretty expensive.
But and on Instagram, James Schroeder 15 is our first comment of the morning, and he says, "I have to get 2 cats to keep my Tesla safe."
And certainly don't feed them, or don't feed them well enough to keep them looking to hunt. So anyway, that was the reason for the background image. The image itself, by the way, was rendered by ChatGPT-4, which to the majority of you may be a large language model not capable of doing images. But most recently, over the last couple of weeks or so, they've combined ChatGPT-4 with DALL-E, which is an image-generating AI software package. So you can literally use a prompt and say, give me text or give me an image, and it will do one or the other. And we're finding that we're preferring ChatGPT-4 images because they tend to be more relevant to the prompt, more colorful, and they actually render text correctly. Like that license plate there, that could be a real license plate. Normally with the old Midjourney, you would get gibberish, funny characters and nonsensical words. And so we're enjoying using ChatGPT for our image rendering.
That definitely is an interesting wheel, though. The spoke pattern is not anything I have ever seen before.
It almost looks like a Model S from a distance because it has a couple of places where the spokes are close together.
Yeah, but in general, I'm really impressed. It seemed to have gotten the headlights right. It has the right number of hood vanes. The mirrors look just about right on it. I can see that there's a roll bar in the back. My head is blocking whether or not there would be a gas can on it. But that little mouse that's in between you and me that's facing away from us kind of looks like either it's a lion mouse with a mane or a mouse with 2 tails, one in the front and one in the back.
Or a squirrel maybe too.
Yeah, maybe.
And it's probably not, confined to mice and rats. I suppose squirrels, anything that size, might find a safe haven inside a Tesla Roadster.
Yes, they might. And, so, wow, even the fuel port on that is, it's more of a charging port, although it's not there, but at least it's in the right spot. The dark spot there on the car is in the right spot.
And I was proud to see that this particular Tesla Roadster had our red brake caliber powder coating upgrade. You notice that?
Oh, I did.
That
I
was
did. That's great.
that was not factory. All right, we got another image we want to throw up for our viewers, and this one, Jesse, is. Let's see here. There we go. Hang on a second here, and I'm going to bring my images up.
While you're bringing the images up, I'll go through a couple of these comments that we have. PYGKLB from YouTube is on with us. He says, good morning from sunny Western Oregon.
That's a switch. Yeah.
That is a switch. I figured that Oregon was like Seattle. Either it's about to rain or it's raining.
Yeah.
On Instagram, BJ Motors Automotive says, hey, although the Tesla rear drive unit is maintenance free, do you recommend a lubricant and oil filter change interval?
You know, what we do recommend is a gear oil flush. And what our mechanics do is they actually analyze the fluid that comes out. It's usually dark, and sometimes it has some small metal fragments in it. So that is one thing that you can do. There is no filter that you can replace, unfortunately, because that would prevent some of this.
Right.
Now, there's a good aftermarket idea for you guys. Jesse, if we can bring up a picture called Drive Motor. And here is a customer in Virginia that has had his regular preventive maintenance done and on his Roadster. And he ended up with an overheating drive unit for 3 years. And they finally opened this up and discovered this. This is a good reason to extend or to get further into the Roadster annuals rather than just taking the PEM out and blowing out the leaves, dust, debris, and dirt, because the same thing that's going into the PEM oftentimes goes into the motor. And what you have here is the motor, of course, is completely sealed, but you have a heat sink that goes around a the Tesla Roadster motor. Mm-hmm. And that heat sink has fan air blowing through it that helps cool the motor. So it turns out that the Tyson's Corner Service Center found this, and hats off to them. They did the thorough annual, and we're hoping that this has now resolved his overheating problems in his Roadster. And typically the way you find that, an overheating problem, will be power limiting as your first clue that something's not right with either the PEM or with the motor. Here in Arizona, we are a test bed for this type of problem, because when it gets 115 out, there aren't too many Roadsters that haven't gone through the annual that will not go into power limiting mode.
Correct.
So this is definitely something that you want your service provider to be aware of and to focus on, so they don't just do the PEM. They also do the motor. I checked with our guys, by the way, and it turns out that we did not have this extra step on our list of requirements for an annual preventive maintenance. And for those of you interested, it's on our website under the service tab, and you'll see a button there, or a section, Roadster Annuals, where we list all of the things that are done during the Roadster Annual. But it turns out, despite us not having it on that list, which we quickly added, they were routinely doing this because of the problems that we've had here in the Southwest with extreme heat.
Well, sure. Power limiting tends to take place when the at least in the PEM, when it gets above 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Mm-hmm. And when you're pulling a Roadster out of a summertime garage here in Phoenix, you could be as high as 125 degrees, and you haven't even driven yet.
Right.
So that little tiny delta in temperature makes this a really good place for us to be able to test to see how well these cars can cool themselves off.
Mm-hmm. And then remember, when you're driving and it's 115 out, you're driving over black asphalt, which has a lot of radiant heat. Mm-hmm. In fact, here in Arizona, the common thing in summer is, for the newbies that come here, they want to see if you can fry an egg on the sidewalk or on the pavement, and you can.
Yes, you can. You can. We had one person here at our business decided that she wanted to make cookies in her car. And so we had one day we had chocolate chip. A few days later, we had white chocolate macadamia nut. Surprisingly, very well done. And that's because that's how hot it gets here.
Yeah. Of course, you roll up your windows, you put it on a dash, and it's a foregone conclusion you're going to, be able to fry a turkey or make some cookies.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, we want to thank everybody and wish you all a happy Thanksgiving if we don't get to you before we close this podcast. This is a special time of year, and hope you and your family enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday.
So a couple questions or comments that we have. First, Instagram, James Schroeder 15 again is coming into us from New York. So thank you very much. He had the comment about having a couple of cats to keep his Tesla safe from rodents. BJ Motors Automotive is a UK EV specialist, and they had asked the question above about the oil. PYGKLB on YouTube says, I have a 2008 Ford Explorer that had to have its wiring harness replaced due to rodent damage.
Yeah.
It was an expensive lesson.
It is. And, oftentimes the wiring harnesses run in places that you can't easily get through, like through the running boards, for example. And if you have plumbing or you have wiring harness issues, it's not like in the places where it's visible, where you can do a splice, a repair, something like that, change a connector. In those cases, the entire wiring harness has to come out and get repaired, and then it gets very expensive.
Yeah, very, very quickly. PYGKLB has even given our Roadsters a new nickname. He calls them the Rodent-ster.
Rodent-ster, yes. Highlander says, we see similar rodent issues on much older factory control panels. They love electrical wiring, don't they? They do.
They do.
I'll tell you an interesting story. Before I left New York, the last few years there, I was working field service, repairing transmitters on the mountaintops. Not broadcast, the entertainment type, but two-way radio, which was before cell phones, was the only way that you could really communicate with people that were in vehicles. And there were usually base stations on top of mountaintops, and the reason they did that is to get line of sight. The higher you went, the greater distance you were able to transmit and receive. Well, to repair these, there were usually shacks, steel shacks, on top of mountains, sometimes block buildings, and the transmitters were inside, and they were difficult to get to. We had four-wheel drive vehicles, especially during winter. But what was not uncommon was a transmitter would go down, and you go inside the building, you open up the transmitter covers and panels, and back then they used tubes, by the way, which had what's called B+ voltage, very high DC voltage. And you would go in the transmitter cage after you turned it off, of course, because you didn't want somebody keying a microphone while your hand was in there.
Oh, yeah.
With 600 volts DC, although that has happened to me. It's a whole nother story. And it wasn't uncommon during wintertime to see that a mouse or something had gotten into that transmitter cage. All was left was remnants of a fried rodent, that had crossing the B+ on the tube and ground. And the reason they were coming in was because it was warm. All of those tubes threw a lot of heat.
Sure.
And they were just looking for a nice warm place to hang out, not realizing there were dangerous voltages.
Oh.
So that's my story. The other part of this, this fan that we showed with all of the leaves and dirt in it, the service manager, a friend of mine in Tesla in Germany, was saying that, yes, they also train all their techies on these types of more extensive annuals.
JD Stu has asked if we can share that image again.
Yeah, let's do it.
And
which one?
The drive motor image.
Drive motor, yes.
And that is quite the training thing to be able to see that. That's just absolutely amazing to see.
What you're seeing here is a shroud that goes around the motor, and what you're not seeing is there's a plenum that comes up to it that is fed by a 12-volt DC brush motor fan, which the placement of is not the greatest in the world because it's down low in the rear of the car. And like people have pointed out, it's like a little vacuum cleaner going down the road, You have vents in the back that let dirt, leaves, and debris in. And anyway, the intent of this forced air is to cool the motor, to keep it cool, because there are actual fins. And I don't know if you can see that closely enough there. We'll probably need to do another Roadster session and give a bit more detail about how this all comes together. But it's called a heat sink that surrounds the drive motor to keep to do some thermal management.
Sure, makes sense. You know, that just means that you're not taking your Roadster on a nice fall drive to go look at the leaves.
Right, yeah. And, you know, there are some other caveats. If you have a Tesla Roadster and you're driving on normal city streets and you're driving a normal, 5,000, 10,000 miles a year, you can get by with an annual preventive maintenance. If, however, you're driving 40,000 miles a year, you need to do that more often because you have more exposure.
Right.
And the worst one is if you live on a dirt road. And every night you come home, you've got a mile or 2 or 10 of dirt road that you're driving across. Then your annuals need to be elevated or be a lot more regular.
Yeah, definitely would be. On Instagram, let's see, on TikTok, Little T says, "Hello, Pete. How are you doing?"
Doing well. Thank you for joining us. All right, Instagram, we did the image again. Okay, so here's another email. I find that a lot of our Tesla Roadster content actually comes from our emails from customers. And I've learned to now begin to review those to give you guys some indication of what other owners are seeing that may be useful for you. So here's a customer in California. He says, the hood release mechanism became inoperable and I can't open the hood. And I think he's meaning the trunk in the back.
Yeah, probably.
Those Ford latches, by the way, there are 4 of them in your car. They're in the front and the back. And I think the most problematic one is the one in the back because it happened to me one year. It was the middle of summer, 110, 115 in Phoenix. I had just come back from the grocery store. I had watermelon, groceries, fruit, ice cream, frozen food in the trunk. And I pull in my garage. And this is before Gruber Motor Company, by the way.
Right.
And I go to open the trunk to take out my groceries. And one of the trunk latches wouldn't open. And now I was in a world of hurt because I knew that stuff was melting inside my trunk. And there is a way, by the way, with a manual tool. And you have to remember which it is. On one side, you push. On the other one, you pull. And you can't really see well inside there. So you have to crack it a little bit, put a flashlight in there. And if you know just where to place that tool, you can pop that manually. So it's not an uncommon failure. It was a Ford part, a European Ford part, and they do become defective. There's something else that you can do as well. There's a solenoid behind the rear trunk, which you have to take off the rear bumper in order to get to it. Once you're in there, you'll see a 12-volt DC solenoid that pulls on the cables that release the trunk latches, the 2 Ford trunk latches in the back. That solenoid has a rubber boot, and as you know, rubber ages, cracks, gets dry, it flakes. That becomes compromised, and when it does, then dust, dirt, debris get into that solenoid. A solenoid is basically a tube with a plunger going in and out, and as debris gets in there, it starts to bind up, dirt and debris. We recommend changing that because it's dirt cheap. I think we sell them on our e-store for under $20, $30 or something like that.
Yeah, they're very, very inexpensive.
Yeah. So again, preventive maintenance that you can do to your Roadster to prevent one of these disasters like I had, where you've got a trunk full of groceries that you can't get out and it's extremely hot outside.
So what did you do to ever get the trunk open?
Peter came over. We figured out how to release it,
okay.
And we finally got it open. But by that time, the ice cream had melted. The frozen food was no longer frozen. You know, the normal things.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So this particular customer has the hood release mechanism or trunk release mechanism that's inoperable. Common repair for us. During the last time he drove it, he said, he recalls a warning that the PEM was hot. I said, when was the last time he had an annual? This is about 3 years. You need to do those every year. That's another good rule of thumb. And a good indication is if you take your VDS screen over to the temperature sensing for the battery and the PEM, you'll be able to see what the temperature bar chart is reading and whether you're becoming to a point where you're going to go into power limiting. I believe we have a newsletter on our website that goes into much greater detail about this.
Yes, I believe we do.
Then he says, I've got TPMS fault indication. Well, everybody does. They're inside your wheels are what are called TPMS sensors that sense the tire pressure. Those have little batteries inside them that only last about 5 years or so. And when they fail, you start getting TPMS errors or you get false readings. You know, your left rear tire is extremely low, whatever the error is.
Right.
So we also recommend proactive replacement of items like this. And then finally, he says, the most serious part at the moment, though, is it won't go into gear. It won't shift. He noticed 3 small sections of wiring on the passenger side floor. So apparently the rodents not only decided to eat some insulation, but take portions of the wire out. Maybe to take them to the scrap yard, get enough of them, and maybe collect some copper, refund or something. He says part of the wiring harness connecting to the touch screen and shift buttons has been chewed by mice. He then ended up setting traps, and he caught a couple of them. So the point here being is, we've got a picture, if you can throw it up, Jesse. It's called bait boxes. And it wasn't this customer that sent us this picture. It was actually another one.
So I'm thinking, to mice, peanut butter is like a drug. So you think these mice were taking pieces of wire out to go get recycling the money to get peanut butter?
Entirely possible, yes. There we go. And the caption on this was, "It's getting cold outside. I'm looking for a place to nest." And that could be your Roadster. All right. So let's see what else we've got. We've got some comments here. He says, this is BJ Motors Automotive off Instagram. He says, my Model 3 has a filter in the rear drive motor. I believe that is true. We don't work on too many Model 3s, so that's quite likely.
Yeah, the Model 3s are, most of the work that we do is powertrain work, not exclusive to that, but that is a majority of it. And the Model 3s, which came out in 2018, have that 8-year powertrain warranty. So the very first of the Model 3s are going to be coming off a warranty here in another year to year and a half. We're starting to see a lot more Model S work. And of course, we've been doing Roadster work for many years.
YouTube Highlander says, happy Thanksgiving to the entire group of Game P. Yes, kindness is still free.
Thank you, Highlander. Instagram, BJ's Motor Automotive. He says, amazing work, guys. Love your content, and gives us a couple of thumbs up. So thank you. We appreciate your comments and participation as well.
TikTok, Fast Acid says, why are these guys wearing sunglasses? And a bunch of question marks. There's going to be a big reveal someday as to why there are usually sunglasses involved in any Gruber video productions or podcast productions. But the time is not right yet. All right, so the world is waiting to see what is happening to the Chinese Roadsters. Well, we have a successful bidder. The cars are currently sold. The bank account has been funded. Mm-hmm. And the buyer prefers to remain anonymous, and the final selling price is also confidential. But other than that, these 3 Roadsters now are currently out of play. What we don't know yet is what will be done with them. Someone was speculating, actually, and let me bring that up, and we can go through some of the speculations here. Of course, more information will be released soon. All right. Are all 3 being sold to one purchaser? That answer is yes. There are actually more than 3. There are 3 complete Roadsters and 1 which is a batch of parts. Not quite enough to put a car together because there's no frame, no PEM, and no battery pack, and suspension components. But there are 4 wheels, tires, 2 doors, the trunk lid, the front trunk hatch, fenders, and front and rear bumpers.
And we know that it's a fourth Roadster because some of these parts are identified with a VIN number that is different than any of the other three Roadsters.
And that fourth Roadster that is in parts is VIN 1185. There was 1107, 1120, and 11. Oh, I'm losing it now. 34, I think. But anyway, VIN 1185, we think, was purchased as a whole, complete Roadster. And remember, the intent of purchasing these cars was, in 2010, there was no other EVs of any consequence that would be successfully reverse engineered to extract the technology. The Tesla Roadster was definitely the car in 2010. So what we think happened was there were 4 of them purchased. One of them ended up being partially reverse engineered, and they took the parts that would be most important in a reverse engineering process if you're trying to extract technology, which would be the electronics and the power electronics module, the VMS module, the switch pack. None of the electronics, by the way, were with this car.
The battery itself was not there, and those are all the things that they would want to be looking at and trying to reverse engineer so that they could figure out how to build their own cars.
And the rest of the stuff, the body parts and the brakes and such, those were of no interest to them because those were off-the-shelf items.
Right.
So that's why we think that the fourth one may have been a complete Roadster. All right. So this one person that bought them bought all 4. Someone says that's an awesome investment, most likely as these cars continue to age and go collectible. Someone else says, great news. I hope that they will be put back on the road and not just collecting dust in a collector's garage.
I'm hoping that they would end up in a museum somewhere, but I don't know.
To be shared.
Yeah, to be shared with people.
On display. Think of it this way. You just paid a whole bunch of money for 3 Roadsters that have near 0 miles. They're just over 100 miles each, all right? Every time you take that car out for a drive, what's got to be running through your mind is, oh my God, I just lost $30,000 with that trip.
Yeah.
And $50,000 for the next trip, you know? These cars are unique, and they are works of art. Putting them back on the road, I think, would be the wrong approach. If you wanted to drive one on the road, just buy one off our Roadster matchmaking site that's already got a few miles on it.
Exactly. You know, I mean, that trip down, the quick trip to get yourself a hot dog and a soda is going to make for an awfully expensive hot dog and soda.
Another question was, how much did they sell for? We're not going to disclose that. The successful buyer has asked for that amount to remain anonymous. He says, I'm glad they're staying in the United States. As far as we know, they will stay in the United States. What we cannot at this point predict is whether they will be on public display, whether they'll be made available to the public. And anyway, that's the story on the 3 Tesla Roadsters. They will be transported somewhere other than our shop soon. And I'm sure that more information will be released because the whole community seems to be watching what is happening to these 4 Tesla Roadsters.
And very honestly, it's not common for us to even know who's buying a Roadster. A lot of times we find out that a Roadster has sold simply because the seller has contacted us and said, yeah, you can take my listing off of the active Roadsters and put it into the solds.
Right.
And that's all we ever know because we are truly just a free matchmaking service in all of this.
Sure. I will say, though, that in the majority of cases, unless the potential buyer knows the seller, and which they oftentimes do because of VIN numbers, location, that type of thing, and they may contact them directly, a lot of the matchmaking activity actually is a buyer-seller matchmaking. So we're in communication oftentimes with the buyers because they'll have a lot of questions. What's your take on this car? We see that it's been through your shop. What was done to it? What else needs to be done to it? What do you recommend? What are your recommendations? So it can go both ways.
It definitely can. So, but it's typical for us to not disclose buyers and sellers because we're that neutral third party. All we try to do is put the buyers and sellers together.
So any questions there that we need to get to?
We have a couple here. False Hopes, in response to the earlier question about sunglasses, says, why are you using so many question marks with about 10 question marks after it? And then Fast Asset says, yeah, it's a seriously big question.
Can't wait. Yeah, it'd be a good video. And
False Hopes comes back on the sunglasses and said, okay, that's fair. It's because they're AI.
Mm-hmm.
Can't wait to hear what the sunglass video is.
YouTube, Nolvers53. Thanks for joining us again. Haven't seen you in a while. I missed a lot of recent podcasts, he says. Been working a lot of overtime lately. Hope everyone at Gruber's doing well. You guys doing well? We're doing great. All right, awesome.
well.
Yes.
Crunch to Grace Hopper, another one of our regulars. He says, thumbs up, number 4, from Newport Beach, SoCal. Called the shop while charging on the way back to SoCal from Starbase, but wouldn't have arrived till after 5 p.m. close. That's right. You were going to try to come by here for a tour.
Yeah.
We'll try again after the chopsticks catch. Wonderful.
Good. I certainly hope that you get a chance to stop by at some point, Crunch. Highlander on YouTube says, yeah, Crunch is here.
Mm-hmm.
Crunch then says, tell hi to Highlander. And then Brian Levin's Drum Cam on YouTube says, thanks for a great show. I met you last week at the Glendale Tesla Service Center. I'm a new Model Y owner. Love learning about the history of the Roadster.
It was nice meeting you too as well, Brian. And let me explain what's going on. The local Tesla service centers are having customer appreciation days where they bring out their newest vehicles. They let customers talk to the technicians and mechanics and sit inside the cars and touch and feel and all that. So we were invited. And of course, we brought a Tesla Roadster.
Ah, okay.
And I could see from the street there were a whole bunch of people there with their later model Teslas. So here we go pulling in, and suddenly the people migrated from all of the later model Teslas over to our Tesla Roadster, and they let us park in the very front there.
Oh,
So
how nice.
we got a lot of press time with that event and enjoyed meeting a lot of the people. You know, the Glendale Tesla Service Center now is the 4th one in our area here in the greater Phoenix area. And I've got to tell you guys, they are doing an excellent job with their facilities. It is like a well-oiled machine. It's clean. It is, impressive. They have a lot of lifts, and their mechanics and their techs are very customer friendly. It's a class act.
Now you've got, I know of 3, so you're going to have to tell me where the 4th one is. We've got Tempe.
Scottsdale was the first.
Scottsdale North.
Tempe was second.
Glendale was 3rd.
Actually, Mesa was 3rd.
Oh, Mesa.
And then
okay.
Glendale is the newest one. Yeah.
Okay. I don't think I knew about the Mesa one.
And we were talking about their growth plans. They have to get ready for the Cybertruck.
Mm-hmm.
And the Cybertruck takes different lifts, special lifts. Now, you talk about the Cybertruck needing a special lift. Can you imagine a semi-truck?
Oh, yeah.
That's going to change everything as well. You're going to have ceiling height issues and, but they are preparing for these additional new vehicles.
Well, I'm wondering, I've heard rumor that the Cybertruck might be as much as 9,000 pounds, which would be heavier than most auto lifts can handle.
Then you have different code requirements for the amount of foundation for the lifts. It gets, it's going to be more complicated than just putting some Roadsters on a lift.
Yeah, sure is. Wow.
All right. So the other portion I have here for you is how to properly mitigate rodent damage in your Tesla Roadster. We talked about Febreze. They say that it's not marketed or scientifically proven as a mouse repellent, but a lot of people swear by it because it has such a strong scent that may potentially cause some discomfort to these small pests. But you know what? I went a step further and I figured, yeah, okay, we're going to get a lot of opinions on Google. But why don't we use AI? So I asked ChatGPT-4. And I said, how do you keep rodents out of your car? Not just, not just the Roadsters. They say, or it says, here's some strategies. Cleanliness and hygiene. Ensure that your car is clean and free of food particles. Good point, right?
Yep.
Got all those cookie crumbs from the kids in the back. What are those rodents going to be focused on?
Cookie crumbs from
First
the kids.
it's the crumbs, and then it's the other stuff that you
Yes.
don't want them eating. Right?
Starts with the crumbs, goes to the
Right.
soy wires.
Parking environment. If possible, park your car in a closed garage. And I don't know if that's going to work well because these rodents have a way of getting through tight spaces, unless your garage, of course, is tightly sealed.
Right.
They say keep it in the garage. This reduces the chances of rodents finding their way into your vehicle. If you park outside, try to avoid areas near bushes or places where rodents might nest. And then they talk about sealing entry points. Well, you could go throughout your entire garage, any gaps, any windows type spaces, air vents, you could try to close those off. They talk about natural repellents before we get to the traps, all right? Some natural substances like peppermint oil, cayenne pepper, or mothballs can act as rodent repellents. Now, they do caution you here, place them near your car, like the mothballs, not inside your car, or your car is going to smell like grandma's closet.
Right.
My grandmother definitely
Exactly.
used that. Be cautious with chemicals and make sure they are safe for humans and pets. Ultrasonic repellents. Now, this one is an interesting one to me because, again, now we're using technology. We're using electronics. These devices emit a high-frequency sound that is irritating to rodents, but not audible to humans. Your dogs may go crazy, come to think of it.
Yeah, it might be.
They can be effective in deterring rodents from nesting in your car. My neighbor actually, we had groundhogs, and they actually put a device into the ground that sends frequencies through the dirt. And eventually those guys went away. They went somewhere else.
Wow.
So it seems to work.
As long as it wasn't your house.
Yeah. Regular checks. Regularly inspect your car for signs of rodents, such as droppings or teeth marks, gnawing marks. Pay special attention to the wiring as rodents often chew on wires. We know that well.
Yes.
Then they talk about get professional help. If you have a persistent rodent problem, it might be wise to consult pest control professionals who can identify entry points and suggest effective solutions. You know, one other interim step between the traps, which, generally kill the pest or the rodent, they have these sticky pads as well. Now, if you check those regularly, you might just find some really irritated mouse that is stuck on this pad that would like to get out of there, and you can, with gloves, of course, pick it up and then take it somewhere else. Now, it still can't get off that pad, though, so I guess how would you remove it?
There are chemicals that can effectively counteract many of the adhesives that get on the sticky pads. The problem that I have seen in experience, when a rodent or an animal gets onto a sticky pad, they'll panic and they'll try to move, and the adhesive is so strong that it just adheres to them more and more and more. And so it can be kind of a hard way for the animal to die. It would take a long time because they're unable to move, and then they're perishing due to maybe lack of moisture or something like that.
Well, that too, yeah, lack of food. It depends on how many days it's been sitting there, yeah. And then the final one, they say use of traps. This is the last one. As a last resort, setting up traps around the vehicle can catch rodents before they enter the car. This should be done carefully and responsibly, considering humane and safe trapping methods. You know, it's always the second mouse that gets the cheese.
Always.
All right, so there you have it. That is the ChatGPT 4 version on how to rodent-proof your Tesla Roadster or your car in general. Crunch to Grace Hopper from YouTube, he says, bring one of the container Roadsters out when one of the rocket-propelled ones premieres at the Indy 500 pace car and other rare events. It would be wonderful to parade these cars. Yeah, yeah. Especially if it was an EV event, you know?
Oh, yeah. You know, in the last podcast, we were talking about a flying EV race.
Yeah.
So the race with the flying EV cars, and to roll out one of these vehicles as whether it's a pace car or even just have the Chinese Roadster out at one of these events, even if it's just on a trailer. It's the rarity of that particular car would be pretty incredible.
It would be. YouTube Highlander says, is it sunglass commercial time? Actually, Richard's out today. Are you guys well versed on doing the sunglass commercial?
Well, yeah, I think we can give it a shot. So my sisters volunteered me to cook the turkey this year. I'm not going to be deep frying it like Mark, but I did get a new oven just for this turkey. What I noticed though is what I noticed is that the oven has a really bright light inside. So I'm going to give my turkey sunglasses while he's baking inside there. But afterwards,
you weren't expecting that, were you?
But afterwards, what's the turkey going to do with his sunglasses? So if you hop over to our website, grubermotors.com, you can purchase sunglass cases, $79.95, or pop in a discount code with Richard or Aaron and get, is it 10% off?
10% off.
10% off.
I am so surprised that you allowed the use of the code Richard in your monologue there.
I really thought you were going to put Aaron before Richard.
It's the holidays, so
nice.
He's being generous.
Yeah. It's the season of giving.
Code Aaron is one letter less, so.
But no code Cass. Unfortunately.
Nah, it's 2 little letters, and we need more. Yeah.
Cool. All right, looks like a few more comments here. YouTube Crunch Grace Hopper says, keep a few of those excellent working and inexpensive battery-powered traps around to get a real sense of your rodent population. Only teeth-proof hermetic sealing works for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That some sort of hermetic seal would be the main way to do it. I do like our earlier comment that we had. Just get a couple of cats.
Yeah.
I also like the idea of there are a few things that will help keep the rodents away from your car more than drive your car.
Yeah. By the way, the cat that I told everybody about earlier, maybe it was in the other podcast, I had a barn cat. And,
yes.
I had a rat problem in my barn when I was homesteading in New York. And anyway, my neighbor, Joey, who was 6 years old, great kid. He used to come by all the time and help me farming and stuff, and he loved hanging out with us. But anyway, he had a cat that they wouldn't let in the house because it was so dang ugly. It was a one-eyed cat. But he loved it, and it was Joey that eventually brought over his cat. And I think her name was Rosie or something like that. And she cleaned up. She took care of that rodent problem that I had.
Oh, that's so funny. Growing up, we always had cats around the house. It was North Idaho. It's a rural area. Gophers were the big thing for us. But you pretty much you stop feeding your cats in the springtime once the grass starts to grow, because that means the rodents are out and be able to make their nests. And so you pretty much stop feeding your cats, and then you don't have rodent problems.
Right. And the cats are well fed.
And the cats are still well fed.
They are carnivores after all.
Yeah, it gets to be late summer, and you're like, man, dang, you're a fat cat.
Do they really want that fake kibble, Or
I know.
do they prefer, a great steak, at least a cat steak, yeah. So let's see, what do we got here? TikTok, ZBD Beatbox says, comment on the big gigantic failure of the Las Vegas Formula One. All I can say about that is we actually had a Formula One event here in Phoenix like 30 years ago. Yep. The reason I know that is at the time I was president of the Ferrari club, the local club.
Okay.
And we were invited to take our cars there in downtown Phoenix. They went through an enormous amount of work to put up curbs and redirect the streets and, change downtown. You couldn't drive downtown for a week because of all of the preparation and changes. And those of us in the car community were excited as heck because we thought, hey, we're going to be like Monaco finally. We're going to attract, that type of clientele, that type of tourism. Everybody was excited. And our Ferrari club was there with our cars. People loved seeing them. But it was the same kind of flop. It was the wrong audience here in Arizona. This is a Western audience. They're not this, yacht owning crowd that likes this sort of thing. They probably didn't even understand the cars and the technology. They drive pickup trucks here. Ooh, I'm going to get in trouble. All right, now I'm not going to go any further here.
I remember that. One of the things I remembered the most was about 3 weeks out. The race is on its way. Tickets are being sold, stands are being built, streets are not closed yet, and the Formula One people come to inspect the progress.
Right.
And they get to the city and like, it's all wrong. and the people in the city are like, what are you talking about? Well, like for example, your concrete barriers. What? They're a yard tall. They're 36 inches tall. They need to be a meter. What do you mean a meter tall? It's not a meter tall. It's not safe. The difference between a yard and a meter is about an inch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They had to re-pour the forms and raise those fences up, and they had to get it all done immediately because it was 3 weeks away from race time.
Yeah.
And they had to hire contractors in at great expense and extend the top of the concrete fences by an inch.
Yeah.
And it was that kind of stuff that it was I remember that the race people were very, very hard to work with. They came across as very arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
And hearing in the press.
They had strange accents.
Oh, yes.
There was a culture clash. They didn't want to drink beer. They wanted to drink champagne.
Exactly.
It was a completely wrong venue.
And Las Vegas, I'm
different.
reading the press before the Formula One event even took place, and hearing all the same things. Shop owners aren't going to be allowed to get in their shops. They can't open it because how dare they get a chance to see these cars without paying for them, and on and on and on.
Right. Yep.
Wasn't there a Ferrari that ended up getting totaled or something that couldn't complete the race because of a pothole or something?
It wasn't a pothole. It was it happened during practice, and it was that Las Vegas had not adequately welded all the manhole covers down into the street.
Oh, okay.
When these cars are going by these manhole covers, when they're going around the streets at 150 miles an hour, there's a lot of vacuum pressure that pulls anything up. And a car ran over, just went over a manhole cover, and the manhole cover came up and hit the bottom of the car as it was going by.
Wow.
And that was, they only practiced for like 8 minutes, and this happened, and then they shut it down and had to, again, do emergency repairs throughout the track and so on and so forth.
Right. Speaking of Formula One, we should probably mention this is a Roadster podcast, I understand, but we do battery work. We repair Roadster batteries, and we've been doing that since 2014. And the type of work we do is finding resistive cells, finding bad bricks, isolating them. But we got an unusual request last week. There apparently is a LaFerrari.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a car that is going to be sold at the Barrett-Jackson auction in January 10th, I think. But it's got a bad battery. So guess what's coming to our shop? We're going to work on a LaFerrari battery. It's a hybrid.
Right.
So it's not going to be the full 1,000-pound pack or the 1,200-pound pack in a Model S. This is going to be a cube, and it's going to be a bit smaller. But the same technology applies. We're going to be looking for a resistive cell that is keeping the car in power limit mode.
And my understanding is that LaFerrari battery is like $300,000 to replace.
Well, yeah, interesting story. There's only one in existence in the world now. At least that was the initial story. It's in Italy, but it's already spoken for. So there are no options. So the only option is a repair. Well, I can't think of anybody better than us to repair this thing, especially considering it's right here in Scottsdale. And this isn't the first time we've bailed out a car at Barrett-Jackson that needed to sell the next day. I remember years ago, one of our local customers was selling his Tesla Roadster, a Radiant Red Roadster.
Mm-hmm.
The night before the auction, his car stopped functioning. And, of course, now it wasn't going to cross the auction block. So at 4 o'clock, we got a call. My son Peter drove out to Barrett-Jackson. By about 8 or 9 o'clock, he had it running and functioning again, and it crossed the auction line. And this was a car that at the time, Roadsters were selling for $45,000. This particular one, again, had two rich guys bidding on it. It sold for $93,000.
Wow.
And there happened to have been two Roadsters at Barrett-Jackson that were selling at the same time, back to back, which is rare because normally they don't do well selling Tesla Roadsters. The second one that sold was a Thunder Gray. It sold for $45,000. So again, the lesson there was we can fix it. We can fix it fast. We can help you sell your car at Barrett-Jackson. And if you have two rich guys bidding on your Roadster, you're probably going to do quite well.
That's right. That's right. Now, we're going to be partnering with a local auto shop that does repairs of exotic cars.
Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and yes, we're going to collaborate on this one, and we're going to both learn some things.
It should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that. So we have on YouTube, Bill Nye the Russian Spy says, "What do you call a dinosaur with one eye?
No.
Do you think he saw us? What do you call a dinosaur with one eye and short arms? Do you think he saw us, Rex?"
Oh my! These are rough.
All
These
right.
are rough.
Yeah.
PYGKLB on YouTube says, "If it doesn't have a pull handle and 3 reels, it doesn't belong in Vegas."
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then ZBD Beatbox on TikTok says, "The manhole cover on day 1 of practice closed the course for the night."
All right, going back to Tesla Roadster stuff, we've got another email here.
Just so you know, we are at the end of the show almost.
I see it, yes, 11:56. 4 minutes to go. Got a 2009 Roadster here. And the email is, "Hello, sir. We have a problem with our car because in 8 years we haven't charged it. Now we can't start or charge it. Can you help us?" Well, a Tesla Roadster can be recovered for the first 6 months or so, or even a year sometimes, if a service plug has been pulled. If it hasn't been pulled, we can recover in the 3-month range, usually level 1 recovery, which means we don't have to pull the pack, level 2 up to 6 months. But beyond that, without the service plug pulled, there are so many cells that have gone defective in that car, it's no longer cost effective because you'd have to change the majority, if not all, the sheets, especially with an 8-year brick Roadster. So the lesson there is make sure that you have a device in your car like an OBMS system that tracks the charge and the state of charge in your car if it's unattended. If you're on vacation, that will notify you on your cell phone if something's wrong. The circuit breaker tripped. It's not charging, whatever the problem is, and you can send someone over to fix whatever that is. Thunderstorm rolled through, circuit breaker tripped, reset it, you're good to go. The second thing is make sure that you pay attention to your Roadster before they die. Before the 0% state of charge no longer allows you to do a charge from the charge port door. It will beep at you, and it'll do that for a couple of weeks.
Right.
It's kind of we should probably record that and play that once in a while on this podcast so people get familiar with that noise. But it's kind of like a weird chirpy noise that it does, and it'll do that every minute or so to let you know something's not right. Got to pay attention to that. So the bottom line is a fix for a Roadster like this, there is only one option. Well, two. If you find a collision damaged car at an auction that hasn't gone through title jail for 6 months because they won't charge them and been bricked, then you have a chance at doing a used battery pack replacement, which works quite well, by the way. The other option is Tesla. Tesla has changed the cost of their battery packs from $30,000 to $40,000, and that's before tax. So it was $34,000 with tax. Now it's more like $45,000 with tax, but it's still your best or only option at this point in time. Now, one of our German service partners, Marco Nolte, is working on a Tesla Roadster battery replacement pack, and he's in the early stages of resolving some of the error codes. He may just have a product eventually, but it hasn't happened yet. So right now, that is your only option. YouTube Highlander, Sunday, I watched a PBS show that was sponsored by the Gruber family. Was that you? No, that's actually also a Peter Gruber. And he has a foundation. He also supports scientific endeavors, kind of like the Nobel Prize. And they do fund things like this. So that was a different Gruber family. Great family, by the way.
Now, if I understand correctly, or if I recall correctly, is it not true that in that Bavaria area of southern Germany where you're from, Gruber is one of the more common names, one of the more common surnames?
It's like Smith or Nguyen in Vietnam. Yeah,
Yes.
It's a very common name.
That's what I thought.
You know, what I always find funny is when you're driving down the Autobahn, and you go pretty fast, so you can't see many things, but occasionally you'll just see a big semi going by you with gigantic letters that say Gruber. Or you'll see a garbage truck. There's a garbage truck company in my hometown, by the way, called Gruber. But yeah, it's a very common name. Restaurants, hotels, very common. In this particular case in the U.S., though, it's not as common. So, but anyway, that was not us that was funding that PBS show.
We have one more question on Instagram. Tesha Marie 143. Tesha Marie asks, is it best to lease or buy a Tesla?
Well, you're a financial guy. Weigh in on that one.
I have a particular bias in general against leasing. I think of it as many automakers will use it as a secondary financing model. So you get it, you basically are paying for the depreciation of the car over the first 3 years of the life of the car, and then you end up being roped into either buying the car or owing money at the end. And then you have to buy the car and finance it all over again, and you end up buying it for too high of a price. That's been my personal experience. I did lease a car one time. For some people, leasing can make sense. But in general, I would say it's better to just buy the car. If you're looking to keep your car for more than about 4 or 5 years, then buy it absolutely.
All right. Hope that helped. All right. It looks like we're coming to the close of our Tesla Roadster podcast. All of us here at the Gruber Companies wish you and your families the best Thanksgiving ever. Should be a good one. And we have these podcasts every Tuesday. They're combined with the EV podcast at 10 and then the Roadster podcast at 11. Mondays, we have our communication product podcast. Wednesday, tomorrow, we'll have an AI podcast. We'll spend a lot of time talking about the changes at OpenAI currently, the implications and the ramifications of Sam Altman being fired and people beginning to leave.
Should be a good podcast. We look forward to seeing you this next week, and take care.